There's this moment, and if you've used ChatGPT enough, you've hit it, where it gives you an answer that sounds absolutely perfect. Structured, detailed, cited, and completely embarrassingly wrong. Not wrong like a typo. Wrong like it invented a Harvard study, gave it a fake author, a fake journal name, a fake publication year, and formatted it like a bibliography, so real your professor would have given it a pass. That's not a bug they forgot to fix. That's baked into how the whole thing works, and that's what we need to talk about. Let me back up and explain what ChatGPT actually is, because I think most people still don't fully get it, and that misunderstanding is exactly why they get burned. ChatGPT isn't a search engine. It doesn't look things up. It's a large language model, specifically built on OpenAI's GPT-4 architecture. And what it does is predict the next most statistically probable word based on everything it was trained on. It's pattern completion at a scale we've never seen before. Which is incredible, until it isn't. The difference matters. Google finds, ChatGPT generates, and generating something that sounds true is very, very different from finding something that is true. So let's start with the most embarrassing one. Hallucinations. That's the technical term, and it's weirdly accurate. In 2023, a New York lawyer named Stephen Schwartz submitted a legal brief that cited multiple court cases to support his arguments. Solid stuff. Except, ChatGPT had made up every single case. Mata v. Avianca, Vargas v. China Southern Airlines. None of them existed. The judge was not amused. Schwartz faced sanctions, and ChatGPT had delivered all of it with total unblinking confidence. That's the thing that gets people. It doesn't say, "I'm not sure." It says, "Here are 6 supporting cases," in perfect legal formatting. It's like that one coworker who answers every question immediately and loudly and is wrong about 30% of it. The second failure is quieter but just as dangerous. The knowledge cutoff problem. GPT-4's training data has a cutoff. The base model was trained up to early 2024. Anything after that, new laws, new product releases, new scientific discoveries, geopolitical shifts, it doesn't know, doesn't exist in its world. And here's what's frustrating. It won't always tell you that. Ask it something time-sensitive, and it might answer based on 2023 data as if that's still current. No warning label, no asterisk. Just an answer delivered with the same confidence as everything else it says. Now, to be fair, GPT-4o and the ChatGPT Plus version do have web browsing, real-time search. That helps, but even then, it's synthesizing what it finds, not verifying it the way a trained analyst would. Different thing entirely. Here's where I see people get really tripped up. Complex reasoning, specifically multi-step logic problems and anything that requires genuine mathematical thinking. There's a famous class of problems called ARC-AGI tasks, designed to test genuine reasoning, not pattern matching. GPT-4, as of its most recent public benchmarks, scores around 5% on those. 5. Meanwhile, a human with no technical background scores around 85. That gap is not small. That's "we are fundamentally different kinds of thinkers" territory. I know what you're thinking. Okay, but I use it for writing, not math, so who cares? Fair point. But the reasoning gap shows up in writing too. Ask it to build a nuanced argument with genuinely competing perspectives, and it'll often give you a polished fence sit. It defaults to balance when the situation calls for a point of view. Which brings us to something that doesn't get nearly enough attention. It literally cannot verify anything it tells you. There's no internal fact checker running in the background. When ChatGPT says "studies show," it's not citing studies it read and verified. It's producing language that statistically follows the phrase "studies show." That's it. It's looking inward at its own training weights, not outward at the real world. Practically speaking, this means anything factual you get from it needs independent verification. Not optional, required. Think of it as a very well-read intern who has read everything but confirmed nothing. Now here's one people push back on hard: creativity. And look, ChatGPT is impressive at certain creative tasks. I'm not denying that, but there's a ceiling. Ask it to write in a style it hasn't seen much training data for, or to create something that requires lived emotional experience, grief, failure, actual physical exhaustion, and it'll produce something that's technically correct and emotionally hollow. Like a perfect wax replica of a human face. Looks right, slightly wrong. deeply unsettling. It remixes what it's seen. It doesn't feel what it hasn't. And for certain kinds of writing, that gap is everything. And then there's bias. This one's uncomfortable, but it's real. ChatGPT was trained on a massive corpus of internet text. And the internet, shocker, is not a neutral, perfectly balanced representation of human thought. It overrepresents certain demographics, viewpoints, and languages. OpenAI has done work to reduce this through RLHF, reinforcement learning from human feedback. But bias doesn't disappear just because you add a feedback layer on top. Practically, this means outputs can reflect cultural assumptions that aren't universal. It can frame problems in ways that feel neutral but aren't. I've tested this. Ask it to describe a successful entrepreneur versus a welfare recipient with no other context, and watch what assumptions slide in under the door. Which gets to the core of what I actually think about this. Human expertise isn't obsolete, not even close. ChatGPT is extraordinary at acceleration, at drafting, summarizing, brainstorming, generating options fast. But in domains where being wrong has consequences, medicine, law, engineering, therapy, it's a starting point, not an end point. A senior cardiologist using ChatGPT to quickly summarize recent literature? Smart. A person replacing their cardiologist with ChatGPT? That's how you end up in an actual courtroom, or worse. So here's how to actually use this thing well, because dismissing it entirely would also be wrong. First, treat every factual claim it gives you as a draft, not a delivery. Verify the important stuff. Always. Second, be brutally specific in your prompts. Vague input gets vague output. Ask it to write a marketing email, and you'll get generic corporate soup. Ask it to write a cold email from a B2B SaaS founder targeting mid-sized logistics companies who are frustrated with their current TMS vendor, and now you're cooking with something. Third, and this is the one I personally lean on hardest, use it to think faster, not to think for you. When I'm stuck on a problem, I throw my messy thoughts at it and ask it to push back, find holes, offer angles I missed. That's a collaborator. That's useful. The moment you outsource the thinking entirely, you've handed over the steering wheel to something that doesn't know where it is or where you're going. Here at TechX24 Live, we don't do the breathless AI coverage where every release is the second coming of electricity. What I care about is the actual shape of the thing, where it works, where it breaks, and how to not get caught between the two. ChatGPT is one of the most impressive tools I've ever used. It's also one of the most confidently wrong tools I've ever used. Those two facts coexist, and the sooner you internalize both, the better you'll use it. Because the real failure isn't ChatGPT's. It's handing a chainsaw to someone who thinks it's a butter knife. Learn the tool, know the limits, and stay skeptical, especially when the answer sounds perfect.